Hi friends, it's Lauren. Thanks for joining me in my craft room today. I'm excited because it's a new Pretty Pink Posh release this week, and I am hopping along over on my blog today to show off some of the new products. So let's do a quick walkthrough of what I will be using today. I have some brand new stamp sets and sequins and dies. I had the Mossy Green Confetti Mix, our Autumn Pumpkins, the Fall Jar Set. This is Woodland Critters. It's actually an older set and I'm bringing it in. And I have the new Stitch Torn Rectangles die set, and then this beautiful layered stenciled set that I just absolutely love called Layered Woodland. And as usual, I'm going to start with my stenciling because I will be doing a little bit of stencil paste and it needs time to dry. I'm grabbing my new waffle flower grip mat. This is the 6.5 by 8.5 size, which means I have a little bit more space for my 6 by 6 stencils, as well as some of my larger stencils. I have 6 by 9 stencils as well, so I'm really excited to have this larger size. I die cut some cream cardstock with the largest of those stitch torn edge die set, and I'm going through all the different stencil layers here to kind of figure out how many colors I want to do and to see what each of the different pieces are. And so I noticed that there are leaves on one, we have mushroom tops and more leaves on another, along with acorns, and then another one has the mushroom bottoms and more acorns and more leaves, and then a more detailed stencil, and that's the one I'm going to do with my stencil paste. So I decided to do a little bit more of a unique fall palette, and I'm using Distress Oxides through this first stencil with the larger leaves. And I'm actually going to show a lot of this stenciling. I'm not going to jump through super fast today because I am blending some unique colors together and I want you to see each of those steps. So I'm starting with aged mahogany, and I just put down a little bit on some random leaves, and then I brought in saltwater taffy and I blended some of the leaves with the aged mahogany, as well as added some to different leaves. Then I brought in bundled sage, and I'm just repeating the same thing. I blended a couple with the aged mahogany and the saltwater taffy, as well as started some new leaves. And finally, I'm bringing in speckled egg. So these are the four kind of major colors of my leaves. I will add in some brown later on some of the smaller leaves, but all of these large leaves are going to be a combination of these four colors. And I picked this color palette literally by Googling unique fall color palettes and just kind of going through and finding colors that I thought were really pretty. And then I went to my shelf of Distress Oxides and picked colors that I thought matched with that image really well. Once I was happy with the layouts, let's do a first stencil reveal. It's a brand new grip mat, so it's very sticky. And I'm using it to help me line up my next stencil. And this one is going to have a few more leaves as well as the tops of my mushrooms. So I'm going to use those same colors again. Oh, there's also the bottom of my acorn. So I will bring in a brown here, but for the mushroom tops, I'm going to mix the aged mahogany and saltwater taffy together. And a couple of the mushrooms are close to other openings in the stencil, so I'm just using some masking tape here. This is the 4-inch roll from scrapbook.com in the mint tape. And once I add in the darker color, the aged mahogany, then I'll bring in saltwater taffy and blend those together. So I have two mushrooms, and then there's one little corner of a mushroom that makes it onto my background cutout. The leaves, I'm going to blend together bundled sage and speckled egg so I can have those two colors, and I'm just again masking to make sure I only get the green and the blue where I want it through this stencil. And then for the acorn bottoms, I'm going to bring in some brown. So my two brown colors I'm using are Vintage Photo as the lighter brown, so that will be the bottom of all my acorns, and then the darker one will be Ground Espresso. Once I get all of my acorn pieces stenciled, I'm going to do another stencil reveal. And now I'm going to bring in my third stencil. And this one was a little bit easier to line up because it's going to match the bottoms of the mushrooms and the tops of the acorns. And for the bottoms of the mushrooms, I'm bringing back in that vintage photo. And then the ground espresso, like I said, for the tops of my acorns. I couldn't decide what to do with the smaller leaves, so I thought I would just use the vintage photo just to bring in some more brown into my background. After that, I will bring in the final layer, which have the little mushroom details and the tops of the stems of the acorns and the stems of the leaves. And for that, I'm going to bring in Lunar Paste. This is Gold Rush from Ranger Ink and Simon Hurley. And I'm just going to scrape that all over my stencil, and then I will pick up the excess and save it in my jar for a future project. And let's do our final stencil reveal of this fun, beautiful background. I love using Lunar Paste. They're such a pretty shimmer that it gives to my projects. Like I will show you here when I bring it up to the light. So fun. And now I'm going to immediately wash my stencil and wipe down my grip mat so I don't get any excess ink stuck to my tools. Now that my background is drying, I'm going to move on to stamping, and I picked a bunch of different images from those 3 stamp sets, and I'm going to be stamping with Fallen Leaves VersaFine Clair ink on some watercolor cardstock. So I'm using my Misty, and I'm not going to move my stamps. I'm going to leave them in my Misty for later. So I'm going to kind of go quickly here through my coloring. I use my Distress watercolor pencils, and I just picked colors that I thought matched close enough with my background. As you can see, I brought it down so I could kind of compare the colors. I don't have all of these exact colors in pencil. I mean, they don't exist yet. So I just picked colors that were as close as possible to what I had. So I'm coloring in my mushroom and one of my leaves a kind of more deeper red color. I brought in some pink for all of my critters' ears, and I'll bring it in later for my mouse's tail. I brought in green for another leaf and the stem of my pumpkin, and then I didn't know what to bring in to be blue to tie in with my background, so I decided to color my pumpkin blue, and that actually is Speckled Egg watercolor pencil. I'm going to bring in a bunch of different brown, black, and grays to color in all of my critters. I even combine a couple of the colors to have more shades. So I painted my little hedgehog and my squirrel the same brown, but then I will bring in this dark brown that I'm using for my deer and color in the squirrel and overlap the 2 colors together, so that way it just creates another shade of brown. So just mixing what I have. To color this, I'm using a water brush pen. So this is just like a marker with a brush point on it, and the top unscrews, and this little the pen part of the marker is filled with water, and you can just fill it up with water that you have on hand, and you just gently squeeze it and water will flow out so you can pick up the color from the watercolor pencils and then paint. And this is my favorite way to use these pencils. I've tried in the past to put color down on the paper and then blend it out, and it just doesn't come out how I would like it to. And maybe that just means I need more watercolor experience. So this is how I like to color with these these pencils, and I really like how it turns out. So I'm bringing in some gray for my mouse. I did finish coloring up my bunny. I went with, I believe it was antique linen to color him in. And then for my moth, I saved that for last because I really didn't know how I wanted to color it. So I kind of do a combination of all the browns, and I even bring in some green just to make it look like a foresty moth, if that exists. But it was really pretty. I love the detailed, and there's just such, it's just so cute. I didn't want to not bring it in with the rest of my woodland critters. So I'll finally finish that off. I will bring in that light soft pink again. I believe it's Tattered Rose, and I will add some cheeks to my critters as well. I like adding a little bit of pink to the cheeks with all my coloring. You've probably seen it lots of times if you're a subscriber with my alcohol marker coloring. So have to add it for these guys too. Now I have dies for the two new sets, but I don't have them for the woodland critters. It's on my next order. So I just fussy cut them out and did my best to match kind of the distance of the dies for the other stamps. My background is now dry and I layered it on top of a sheet of this kind of like bronzy shimmery cardstock I have in my stash, and I'm bringing back out those ripped or torn stitch dies again, and I'm going to use the third largest or the second smallest in the set, and I cut it out of some vellum. I wanted something to place my critters on so they didn't get lost on the busier background, but I also didn't want to block my beautiful stencil design. So I'm going to use vellum to help me with that. I'm going to stamp out my sentiment. This is from the Autumn Pumpkins and it says Autumn Greetings, and I like it because it has a coordinating die. I love when my sentiments have a coordinating die. And I stamped it in the same Fallen Leaves First Fine Clear ink, and I'm using a clear embossing powder to emboss my sentiment. Once it's cooled down, I took the coordinating die and cut that out. So now I'm going to start layering things together. I'm going to go ahead and layer my background together. So I glued that shimmery cardstock to my A2 card base, and then I glued my stenciled background to the center of that. I like that little peak of shine around the edges of my background. And before I glue down my vellum, I need to know where my critters are going to go because that will tell me where I can add glue on the back side of my vellum without it being seen from the front. So I did kind of a dry run layout of how I think I want everything to go. And I'm going to glue down any of my critters or elements that are furthest back with liquid adhesive. So my moth is being glued down and my two leaves will be glued down as well with the liquid adhesive. I'm also going to use liquid adhesive on my deer, my pumpkin, and my mushroom. And then I will pop up the squirrel, the mouse, and the hedgehog. Now, my hedgehog and bunny in my head, I was going to have them be next to each other, but because they're like so similar in size, they end up covering too much of each other, and I didn't want to hide any of my critters. My mouse just fit really well next to the squirrel holding that cute little acorn. So it looks good on the left, but when I went to lay it out on the right, I just wasn't really thrilled with it. So I'm going to save that bunny and I'm going to put it on the inside of the card later because I think the hedgehog is my favorite of the two. So I wanted to put him on the front of the card. Once I have everything glued down, like I said, I can turn it over and see where all of the critters are attached to the vellum, and then I can use that as a guide of where I can add my adhesive to glue this piece down to my card base, that stenciled background. I'm going to use my grid mat to get it as centered as possible, and I noticed while I was filming that I was a little off-centered, but it still turned out good. Luckily. So I went ahead and glued that down, and then again I'm playing with the bunny. I feel like it just hides too much, so I didn't put it on. My sentiment, I'm going to pop that up as well with some foam adhesive, but it's still looking really off-center to me since that mouse sticks out so far to the left. I just feel like it needs something on the right to balance it out. So I went ahead and stamped and colored in a blue butterfly just off camera real quick because it was bothering me. And I am just going to attach it with a little bit of foam adhesive, and I'm going to make it go off to the right as much as possible with it looking still kind of natural. And that just helped, I think, a little bit to make it look a little more balanced in my scene. Using my liquid adhesive, I'll just add some glue to my bunny and stick that right on the inside of the card. Now I did add in those mossy green confetti After I finished filming, I realized as I was taking photos, I forgot to add it. So you'll see that in the final picture here in just a moment of adding in those little green flat back sequins to just add a little bit more green and shine to the card. But I hope you're as excited as I am for the new Pretty Pink Posh release. You can find a link to the shop down below in my description. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll click like, and if you're new here, I hope you'll subscribe and come back. As always, you can find everything I use down below in the description box. Thank you and have a wonderful day. Bye!